I am a property of the military. My job is actually to maintain an apartheid system. The military is a part of your identity. It's as much you as you are Israeli. I'm not sure that my role started with my enlisted. I think my role started when I was about 5 and I realized that my father is putting uniform and going out to Lebanon as a reserve soldier. That's the first time I felt that I'm a part of the military. The next time was in kindergarten. The next time will be when I was 16 and I will get my first draft letter. And in this draft letter, it will be written that I am a property of the military. This is something that every kid in Israel goes through. When you're getting into the military system, in the end, you're already so much embedded inside the military. The military is a part of your identity. It's as much you as you are Israeli or Jewish, for that matter, in Israel. And going into the military, I was expecting to be a manifestation of me just in uniform, protecting my country, protecting my family. I grew up on hearing the stories from Auschwitz of my grandma. My grandma and grandpa was the only survivors from their family, from the Holocaust. All of my grandma's family were killed in Auschwitz. I went through 7 months of boot camp, and in the end of the 7 months, I found myself in Hebron. This is the only city that have a settlement in the middle of the city. So getting into the Hebron, one of the first things that I had to do was protect a Jewish holiday for 180,000 Palestinians. So settlers throughout the West Bank and Israel, Jewish settlers, could come into Hebron and celebrate. So there's thousands and thousands of Israelis and Jewish settlers from across the West Bank coming to celebrate. And the only way to keep them protected is to make sure that no Palestinian is leaving his home. And the first time was like a movie. You know, we birthed into the city with our guns in our hands and our uniform and vest with grenades and 6 packs of ammunition. And we're just screaming curfew. And you see the chaos. Because wherever you are when the curfew starts, this is where you're stuck. And you cannot go anywhere else. So you better be at home when we're starting to count the curfew. Now, the official orders to anyone who breaks curfew is shoot to kill. This feeling of power at once came as a big confusion to me. I think I wasn't clear if I'm enjoying the power of controlling all of these people, or if I don't understand why kids look at me frightened. Why are they running away when I'm walking into the street? Before my service, I work as an educator. I love kids. So I think I was very confused on why a kid will find me scary. You know, I realize now in perspective, it got to do something with the fact that I have my boots on, my uniform, my helmet, my 6 packs of ammunition, my 2 hand grenades. And I think in a very rapid pace, I realized that my job is actually to maintain an apartheid system. Very early on, I understood that the rights that the Jewish settlers have are not the rights that the Palestinians have. I understood that I cannot touch a Jewish settler if he is attacking a Palestinian. The best I can do is call a local police department to come handle it, like I would do at home in Jerusalem. So these Jewish settlers that live in Hebron are living under the same rights that I live in Jerusalem, but the Palestinian next to them, next house over, next building over, sometimes next apartment over, lives under my rule, my military rule. And I can do whatever I want with him. I can take his home as a temporary base for a few hours to a few days to a few weeks. I can decide that I'm arresting the people of the house and tying them up to the fence of my base. If we will get an order to demolish their home or just lock their front door and don't let them out into the street their house is on, a street that only Jewish settlers can walk on and Palestinians cannot. So they have to walk through windows to yards, into the other side, into the Kasbah of Hebron. I think realizing all of that in a very, very early stage in my service helped me understood that someone was lying to me along the way. I felt like I'm terrorizing people. I feel like for the first time in my life, the boundaries between good and bad that I learned as a kid, and obviously I learned that I'm on the good side, was broken. I felt like I am the terrorist. And my job was literally to scare people. That was actually our defined mission, to make sure that to instill fear in the hearts of Palestinians in Hebron. And that's exactly what we did. I don't want to live in an ethnocracy. I don't want to live in an only Jewish state that values privileged Jewish life on every other life. This urges me to understand that I want my kids to grow up in a place when they don't have to oppress anyone, they don't have to be soldiers. I guess that's what pushed me to do what I'm doing. I think after I left the military, I was still under the impression that the things that I was going through were my personal experience. And leaving the military and starting interviewing soldiers really, I think, made me understand that there's a systematic oppression that is taking place in the occupied territories. Israeli military practice of executions and targeted killing, and also confirming a kill, what Eliyahu Azaria did on the Palestinian in Hebron, are all practices that are alive in the military system, in the even police system or Mossad. I am, in my previous role as a researcher into the Israeli military, are taking testimonies from many soldiers, and one of the soldiers I'm reaching to is a soldier from a semi-elite unit called in Hebrew Duvdevan, Cherry in English. And he's telling me a story about how he's serving after this new rule from the Supreme Court has been mandate, and they cannot do targeting and killing anymore. And how their officer is gathering the unit together and telling them, we're going to go out tonight to capture this person. Is highly dangerous. What we're going to do is we're going to come in 5 or 6 people's unit into their home in the middle of the night, break in quietly, go up to his bedroom, go into his bed, and point a gun into his head. Now, if he just wake up and surrender, we're taking him into the base. But if he scream, you shoot him in the head. If he lifts his blanket, you shoot him in the head. If he lifts his hands or legs or trying to do any movement, you shoot him in the head. Now, because we understand as rational human beings that no human being can wake up in the middle of the night with a gun into his head and not scream or move, we understand these orders as an execution orders that bypass the Supreme Court order. And instead of saying we're going to execute this person, they're saying we're going to arrest this person, but if we feel there's some kind of danger, maybe he have a gun in his bed, maybe he will scream for help, we execute him. We continue to interview dozens of this Cherry unit that tells the same story about different cases, but the same exact practice in the occupied territories. They knew that this is what they're supposed to do. They knew that they were going into homes in the middle of the night to execute people. In October 2015, the latest intifada is starting, and even the official rules of not executing human beings are going off the window. From the prime minister, into ministers, into media people, everybody is talking about it from left to right, about you shoot to kill. If you see a girl with scissors next to you, you shoot to kill. Executions are very much alive in the Israeli military, the Israeli police, the Israeli discourse. People are calling for executions. People are calling for not only executions on, what they call terrorist or resistant people, Palestinians that are running at you, but when Eliyahu Azaria doing what he does, he's doing it after he heard this specific order of executions what they call a terrorist from every section of the Israeli society. Israel is selling this idea of the soldiers are more important than anything. The soldiers are more important than the life of Palestinians. Not only the life of soldiers, the soldiers' identity, security, feelings are more important than a Palestinian life. Don't confuse us with the idea of moral or right or wrong. Whatever soldiers do in the occupied territories are right. Whatever we're doing is the correct thing. Yes, I think the system, is not only inside the military. It's like I said before, that's actually what being an Israeli means. Being an Israeli, growing up in the Israeli educational departments, you understand that all the Arabs hates you, that they're actually, in a way, the continuation of the biblical Amalek or Hitler, that everybody there want to throw you into the sea. This is what you're growing up with, and you really believe in that. I mean, going into the military, you're already going so full of hate and fear at the same time that you don't need much to be very aggressive, violent, and racist toward Palestinians as subhuman. The occupied territories are like an ex-territory when those human beings are not considered to be human beings. This is a process that you start in a very early age, being enforced inside your boot camp, and later on when you're going into your service, when you do not see human beings in front of you. Do not believe their feelings. They are subhuman. And I think that the Arab Jews in Israel are probably the most tragic story in the entire story of Zionism after the Palestinians. And it's not being talked enough, obviously, inside the Israeli society or in the world. The Mizrahi Jew, the Arab Jews that came around the years of 50 and onward into Israel, some came by choice, some came by force, but they didn't came to a country that was theirs. They brought most of the Arab Jews and put them in the most terrible places in Israel, on the borders with Egypt or Jordan or Lebanon and Syria. We put them at buffer zones to protect us from Palestinians. The Zionist organization sends delegations into these Arab countries and called the Jews there to come into Israel. Many of them, like in Iraq or Egypt, had a good life, or in Morocco, and wanted to stay. They didn't know what will be the destiny of this new country, that understood that there's very much likely that a lot of wars will go on there. They felt protected in those countries, and they said no. And the Zionist organization sent another delegations into some of these countries of people disguised as Arabs from those countries, that terrorized those people to try to force them to come into Israel. They were born synagogues. We have testimonies today that talks about how they ran after people in the street and beat them down as so-called Arabs from Morocco, from Egypt or Iraq, trying to scare them. And immediately after that, more people from the Zionist movement would come and say, you see, the only safe place you have is Israel. You have to come now. And after they came, they were being sent into the most disgusting forms of settlement for the newcomers from those Arab countries. They were separated and segregated for years. That was not their country, and it's still not their country. And what they had to do to start to assimilate themselves inside this new country was to make sure that everybody understood that they're actually not Arabs. They look like Arabs, they talk Arabic, but they're not Arabs, they're Jewish. Because you can be an American Jew and you can be a European Jew, but you cannot be an Arab Jew in Israel. And they erase their identity, and they starting to form what we know today as the most extreme right in Israel. They are the extreme right because they have to solidify themselves as the most loyal citizens of the state. Well, as an ex-soldier, I learned very personally that if you will not respect existence, you can expect resistance. And this is how people resist. Israel as a state like to use the idea that Palestinians only understand force or power. But the truth of the matter is that Israelis only understand power and force. We basically describe every form of resistance as terrorism, because the sole idea of the occupation is not to be safe. The sole idea is to create an ethnically cleansed piece of land only for Jewish people, with Palestinian workers. Of course, some Palestinians can stay and do stuff for us, but this is our land. Israel do not hear the calls of Palestinians for equality. What we are seeing in Palestine is what a lot of people like to describe as the most complicated political situation of our time. Is probably the most simple political situation of our time. It's a situation about equality. I support the right of every human being under an oppressive military rule to resist this military rule by any means possible. I do not believe that Israel have a right to occupy millions of human beings without every decent, simple, basic human rights for their name. And I do not believe that Israel would change on its own. As I do support the Palestinian right to resist in any way, I do not believe that their resistance is enough. I do believe that the rest of the world have to interfere in what's going on in Palestine